I'm here, and I'm your guest host, and I'm here to tell you that the death penalties are back. This story broke over the weekend in, of all places, the New York Times. The headline, page one, ominous as it is, Obama institutes end-of-life plan that caused, and then we get a perfect New York Times headline word. Obama institutes end-of-life plan that caused. Try to figure it out. What word do you think the New York Times uses to describe the objections that occurred during the debate on nationalized health care over end-of-life counseling paid for with taxpayer funds that caused, here's the New York Times word, stir. You know, a little bit of minor upset that caused stir. You know, that got those right-wingers all in a tizzy. Obama institutes end-of-life plan that caused stir. Well, the stir may be back. Now, I'm going to explain exactly what the regulations say. But before we do that, I think it's important to get into some background as to why this was taken out of the legislation in the first place and how the whole thing developed. When the president proposed Obamacare, and the bills were introduced in the Senate and the House, initially in 2009 and eventually in 2010, one of the most controversial provisions in there was language that said that Medicare would pay doctors to discuss with patients their end-of-life options for the type of care that they would want to receive. Given that other language in the bill also provided for government panels to decide what the appropriate treatments are for various diseases, the treatments that were not appropriate were not going to be covered, a lot of people developed the very real fear that this end-of-life counseling was going to be nothing more than glorified deciding whether or not you're going to be eligible for this treatment or not. There was major opposition. Sarah Palin coined the term the death panels, and everybody got all over her on that. Nonetheless, it stuck, and people were rightly concerned about whether or not tax money should be used to have doctors go to talk to elderly patients and discuss years before they're sick, what kind of treatment they want to have as they get sick. A lot of people argue that this is not the role of government and that this stuff's going on anyway, that any person who wants to talk with their doctor to plan out end-of-life treatments can do so right now without having language put in Obamacare that says that Medicare has to pay for this. In any event, because of the opposition, overwhelming as it was, they took it out. There's nothing in the bill that passed the Senate and the House providing for any type of payment for end-of-life consultation. It's not in there. It's gone. It was the only way they could pass the bill. The Democrats who voted for this knew that selling Obamacare was going to be difficult, and as we see, it was very difficult. They didn't want to have to try to defend this language that many people believed would lead to death panels that would decide whether or not this treatment is appropriate for this person who is terminally ill and this person who has no hope. So they took it out because they knew they couldn't pass it if it was in. It's not in there. You won't find anywhere on Obamacare anything that says that Medicare will pay for this. Lo and behold, Obama's administration is now writing the rules for the implementation of the health care program. And in the rules that they write, it's right back in. This is such an important point because if they are willing to write in through administrative rules language that was specifically not included in the bill on this end of life, why can't they write back in everything else that was supposedly taken out? You know, there was a huge debate over whether or not Obamacare was going to cover abortion. And the Democrats kept arguing, well, it doesn't say it's going to cover abortion. Conservatives were arguing, as long as the bill doesn't specifically prohibit it, they could indeed cover abortions. This was denied. Well, now we see with regard to this end-of-life care, since the bill didn't specifically prohibit it, it's merely silent on it, that Barack Obama and his bureaucrats can grab their pens and write in anything that they want to write. Obamacare, therefore, becomes far more than the law that passed the House and Senate. It becomes anything that they use their administrative rulemaking power to say that it means. They can literally put in anything. This is essentially dictatorial. It's abusing the legislative process. It's taking the most controversial program that passed under that president, a leap that many of us believe moved the United States close to socialism. There's nothing he's done as controversial as Obamacare. Even as it was, there were things they had to take out in order to pass that bill. And now they're magically back in. What point is there to the legislative process then? If we're going to have this give and take, if we're going to have what the defenders say was a moderate bill, if what the defenders say was being mischaracterized by those of us on the right who said that this was a radical bill, if you can take what supposedly is a moderate bill and turn it into a radical law by using rulemaking authority, what's the point of even having the legislative process? Let's radical it right up with the administrative rules. Now, in the New York Times story, listen to some of these ominous paragraphs. Under the new policy, outlined in a Medicare regulation, the government will pay doctors who advise patients on options for end-of-life care, which may include advance directives to forego aggressive life-sustaining treatment. Under the rule, doctors can provide information to patients on how to prepare an advance directive stating how aggressively they wish to be treated if they are so sick that they cannot make health care decisions for themselves. While the new law does not mention advanced care planning, the Obama administration has been able to achieve its policy through the regulation writing process, a strategy that could become more prevalent in the next 2 years as the president deals with a strengthened Republican opposition in Congress. This was a giant bait and switch. There was a lot of winking going on the left. Let's pass whatever we need to pass. We've got to get something through. We have to have some sort of national health care legislation passed. And let's throw out this. Let's throw out that. Let's throw this out to get this Democratic vote here and that Democratic vote there. And remember that this thing passed with the barest of margins. Because once it's in, once we get it passed, we can use our rulemaking authority to let it say whatever we feel like wanting it to say. Well, the end-of-life counseling, that's very, very important. It's a very, very major. Don't worry. We'll take it out, but we'll put it right back in. It's nothing more than getting some moderate Democrats to buy into legislation that would be easier for them to defend and then come back with something that they never could have defended had they had to do so. But they didn't have to do so, and we don't even know that it's in the legislation. We don't even know that it's in the rules until well after the election. So much for the president moving to the middle. He can do all the posturing that he wants and agree to all of the tax extension deals that he wants and try to send out this arm of cooperation to the Republicans in Congress. That's all for show. The reality is what he's doing in terms of where the public policy ends up. And he's making it very, very clear right now that he's going to use every power he has to not only defend Obamacare, but make it a very, very different law than the one that the Congress passed. My name is Mark Belling. Our phone number on the Rush Limbaugh program is 1-800-282-2882. I'm Mark Belling, and this is EIB. I'm Mark Belling, sitting in for Rush. I want to get to callers on this topic because this is a really big deal. And given that this story broke in the New York Times and it was over the holiday weekend, I'm not sure how much play it's getting in a lot of other newspapers. Given that I'm in New York and we couldn't get any newspapers delivered, I wasn't able to even look at any others. We've got to talk about this because what this means not only is that one of the most noxious parts of Obamacare is back in. It means that the president is willing to use rulemaking authority to put in there everything that he wants in, and they don't want this out. In fact, in the New York Times story that broke all of this, they quote an email from one of the leaders of the movement in favor of all this end-of-life counseling, in which the email said, "We would ask that you not broadcast this accomplishment out to any of your lists, even if they are supporters. Emails can easily be forwarded. Thus far, it seems that no press or blogs have discovered it. But we will be keeping a close watch and maybe calling on you if we need a rapid targeted response. The longer this goes unnoticed, the better our chance of keeping it." Now, that's an email that came from the author of the original end-of-life proposal, Earl Blumenauer of Oregon. He put that email out in which he essentially said to his supporters, "We've gotten this into the rulemaking authority, but don't tell anybody about it. Don't even tell your supporters. Don't advance this to anyone. We don't want the media to find out about it. We don't want the bloggers to find out about it." Well, somehow the thing got into the hands of, believe it or not, the New York Times, and now it is out there. But they knew the longer that they could keep this quiet, the greater the chance that they could avoid any kind of backlash. Let's go to the telephones. Louisville, Kentucky, and Marty. Marty, you're on EIB with Mark Belling.
Hey, good afternoon, Mark and everyone. Listen, this is more sinister than it appears, because the government gives the doctor a financial incentive to withhold care and punishes him if he spends too much. In other parts of the bill, the doctor is evaluated as to whether or not he is a meaningful user. That's the term they use, a meaningful user of the system. And he's evaluated by how much money he spends. So the same person who is being reimbursed to give end-of-life counseling is being given an incentive not to spend money on the patient, and is being punished financially. They reduce Medicare payments, and in some cases, they have the ability to pull your license.
Well, I think what you're mentioning is crucial.
Money.
It's almost like a quota system for cops in writing out parking tickets. The point that he's making is very, very important here. No one objects to doctors right now talking to their patients about the kind of care that they're going to want if they face terrible problems in the future. That's going on all the time right now, and nobody has a problem with it. What this is language that says doctors will be specifically paid by Medicare to do it, meaning there's now an incentive for doctors to raise the issue and push the point because it becomes something that is billable. Medicare will reimburse them for it. And exactly as you point out, given that they're going to be creating all of these rules about what's covered and what isn't covered through this very rulemaking authority that they're using to come up with this rule, they can very easily say that we don't want doctors to do A, B, C, D, E, and F, but we do want them to do G, H, and I. And G, H, and I includes this end-of-life counseling that can be very, very heavy-handed. Well, you really wouldn't want, if you sustain a heart attack, us to go through this extraordinary procedures in order to keep you alive because, after all, you have all of these other problems. That's what we're talking about here. And when you put in a financial kicker in which the doctor is specifically paid to bring this up and specifically paid to talk about it, what doctor who's out there trying to survive under this morass of federal rules isn't going to want to do it? For people who want this kind of consultation, it's available. There isn't anybody in America whose doctor isn't willing to talk about what kind of treatments is going to be available. But to put this into some separate category where it becomes a separate billable process as opposed to just the general consultation and care that a doctor would provide, that's very, very powerful. And this is why a lot of people think it does lead to the death panels. And the point that you make, Marty, is excellent because it shows that there's an incentive here now for the doctor not to provide care and indeed to push the envelope with the patient.